Hi, my name is Kathy Fitzgerald, and today we're going to be talking about Section D, which has to do with person-centered planning, values, and goals. I think it's very easy and sometimes dangerous to get lost in the bureaucratic paperwork of putting a plan of care together without thinking about um, the values behind it and expectations that we have behind sort of that plan that we're going to be submitting. Bureaucracy in itself creates a lot of uh, making sure that we've documented, and those are all very important things. Um, the state needs to be accountable for the money they've spent. We need to be accountable. But I want you to really be thinking about the person-centeredness of your son or daughter's plan and how it needs to be really focused about him or her. So, several years ago in our state, we had an outside or independent, if you would, quality assurance system. And I loved that system because it made everybody accountable, uh, families, agencies, and the state, uh, to providing a level of service and care that was really optimal. And the way they did that was really reviewing and looking at individuals' plans of care in their life, their site review, looking at that particular person's life based on a set of core values that would be core values for all of us, whether we had a disability or we didn't. And those core values really are made up of 5 different parts. The first part is about choice and self determination. So you can imagine that we all expect uh, to have choice and to be able to make uh, decisions about how we want our life to be, our day to be, our afternoon to be. That we have options available to us. Um, One of the first things that, if you're working in this field, if you're a teacher or a provider, and you begin to see behaviors, one of the first things you ask about is, well, did you ask them what they wanted? Did they have an opportunity to make a choice about what was going to happen? Because when we are denied something as simple as choosing what we're going to wear, what we're going to eat, where we're going to go, that begins to create a lot of frustration and anger that for many people, especially if your son or daughter doesn't have a good command of language, uh, is reflective in their behaviors. So just making sure that we're offering everybody always choice and determination, whether it's for my daughter, for example, who's pretty much nonverbal, a choice between, do you want to wear this blouse today or this blouse today? Do you want to have oatmeal for breakfast or do you want eggs for breakfast? So that she has some say in how her day is, how it starts, and what it's going to look like the rest of the day. The second core value that the site review system was based on had to do with respect and dignity. Now, my daughter, if you looked at the ICAP scores, you would say she's pretty much she needs a lot of help. Okay, she needs a lot of help, and even though she's pretty much nonverbal, uh, she knows. She is very sharp. She knows when people are treating her with respect and treating her with dignity. And her attitude and how she gets along and how she does uh, really, there's night and day difference when people are treating her that way. Even though her scores are low and her cognitive level might be, you know, toddler, if you're treating her like a toddler, if you're not showing her an adult kind of respect, she's 34 years old. She's learned a lot in her 34 years, and she knows. So be aware that as you're putting these things together, that you're incorporating uh, choice and dignity and respect in that plan of care, and how you write that up and what your expectations are of the people who are going to be providing those services. The third segment of this quality assurance system had to do with health and safety. And I want to caution families not to be overly concerned about health and safety, because I know that that's a core instinct for all of us to be concerned about, is it going to be safe, are people really watching what's happening? But the truth of the matter is, um, uh, yes, you have to have health and safety, but you have to have um, something I call dignity of risk. And that's opportunities to do things that are new, that are different, that offer opportunities for people to fail. We don't learn necessarily from our successes, we learn from our failures. So if you don't give me the opportunity to try something new, I'm not going to learn. And that means that we as families and as the state have to be willing to accept a certain amount of risk, if you would, when you think about health and safety. Is it safe for Kara to go in or do this particular activity? With the right kind of supervision, could that happen? So think about health and safety from that regard. And then relationships. I think about relationships really as health and safety. And let me tell you why. So, Kara can't really say if somebody's been mean to her or hurt her. She can't tell me that. The only way I would know that would be by her behavior. But if there are enough people in the world and in her community that know what her behavior is really saying, then that amounts to health and safety. If somebody says to me, oh, Kara was doing this today, then I know that something is not quite right. I'd like to tell the story of a coworker of mine who had a sibling or has a sibling with a disability who wanted more independence, and how difficult that was for the family to allow that independence, because this is a person who could easily get into trouble, right? And so they gradually began to work on uh, um, allowing him opportunities for that independence. And so it's really gotten to the point that he can be out in the community pretty much on his own. Um, he goes to typically the same haunts, and people know him there, and they know what to expect, and he knows what he needs to do in each one of those environments. But she was telling me that one day that she was driving along the street, and she happened to see her sibling on the street, and he had a flat tire. And so she pulled over to the curb and got out and said, "Say, what's going on? Can I help you?" And almost immediately, a neighbor came out and said to her brother, "Do you know these people? Who are these people?" So, in that regard, that relationship was really health and safety. That relationship was that somebody in the community cared enough about him and knew enough about him that they were going to be checking on him when they saw something out of the ordinary. Um, so the importance of making sure that you're developing or having opportunities for your loved one to develop relationships is more than just having friends, even though having friends are certainly important, and we all know how important they are in our lives. It really is much more critical for people with developmental disabilities. And then the last section that was evaluated in that quality assurance system had to do with community participation. And um, philosophically, there's a lot of difference between being in the community and participating in the community. So if I am participating in the community, if I belong to the community, then I'm doing things like working on the public garden section that everybody can enjoy, or I'm having coffee with a friend in the coffee shop. I'm really a part of, I'm not parallel, I'm a part of what's happening in my neighborhood and in my world. I guess I would caution you as families to make sure as you're writing those plans of care, as specific as you have to be for goals and objectives, that you're thinking about the underlying core value system, and you're making sure that you're providing those opportunities for dignity of risk, that you're providing those choices, that you're encouraging opportunities for people to be a part of a participating part of their community. So, this slide talks about really what's important to the individual. It gets down to the nitty gritty of how do you really write this plan of care? How do you make it happen? And I think you need to think about what's person centered for that individual. What do they like? What are their strengths? What do they need to learn? What do they need to work on this year? And what goal is it really working towards? Remember thinking about using this year to build on next year, to build on down the road, having the person have the opportunity to be as independent and successful as they possibly can be. Starting with a vision worksheet really, I think, is critical for helping you move down the road. So, for me, for my family, we sit down and we thought about when Kara is 35, what do we want her life to look like? What kinds of things do we want to be in her life? And we really laid that out. And that was the path or the map to help us begin to put together the things that we thought she needed to learn in order to reach that dream, that goal that we all have for her. So take a piece of paper and pencil, sit down and think about if your son or daughter is verbal and can share their thoughts, then you certainly want to make sure that you have incorporated all of those things that might be really important to him or her. I like to um, tell a story about how you come forward with what many people would say were unachievable or ridiculous dreams or goals for people with developmental disabilities. I was fortunate enough to attend some trainings many years back um, through the Inclusion Institute, and one of the things that they talked about was a woman by the name of Judith Snow, who has a very significant limited mobility. They were designing a person-centered plan around her, asking her, you know, what would you love? What would you like? What dream or what occupation sounds exciting to you? And she indicated that she thought driving an 18-wheeler truck was a pretty exciting thing. And if you were doing that plan of care and thinking about that, you would know that this is a person who couldn't drive a car, let alone an 18-wheeler truck. So, what is it about driving that vehicle, that truck, that was appealing to her? And when you think about somebody with limited mobility, if you're sitting uh, in your chair looking out a window watching big trucks going by, the world going by, and you're sitting in your house, being mobile, taking things to people that they might want, traveling. That's important. And as it turns out, she's a very successful woman who, in fact, does travel around the world. In fact, bringing her story, talking about self-determination and choice and all of the things that she's so knowledgeable about, and that people show up and come because they want to hear what she has to say. So really, all the aspects of that truck driver and what he was doing is, in fact, what uh, she was able to make happen. So if somebody says to you, I want to be a fireman, or I want to be a policeman, or I want to be a nurse, there are things about those occupations or those dreams that are achievable. It's a matter of how talented are we, how good are we at breaking those things down and figuring out what pieces we can make happen in their lives, and how do we get there from here? How do we get there from 0 to 50 so that those are incorporated in their lives? So that visioning sheet is really an important piece of thinking about plans of care, because you don't just want a waiver and a plan of care to look at 12 months and that be it. You want to be working towards goals and objectives and outcomes and making lives real and meaningful for people. One of the ways of incorporating those ideas, dreams, and visions is really to kind of use that visioning goal worksheet that should be available PFD as part of this training, but really thinking about it from what's my dream or my vision? Uh, what kind of help do I need in order to make that happen? And how is that a goal or an outcome that I can show uh, and achieve, right? So an example would be for our daughter, we wanted her to have a home of her own, a place that was hers, that we wouldn't have to worry about her being moved from group home to group home when we were gone. This is a big, important piece of our planning and our thinking. And so, if we were going to make that happen, what are the kinds of things that we would need to incorporate in her plan of care? Anybody that was going to own a home of their own would have to have what? A credit rating, right? So, how do we establish a credit rating for her? How do we teach her how to manage or have a way for her to be able to manage finances so that she can learn to show that she has a good credit record? So that's an example of thinking about what you want and what pieces you have to put in place to get to the goal, and how is it achievable? How is it, what are the markers that show that we're making progress um, along those lines? So once you've really thought about goals and places that you want to go, things that you want to do, then we have to think about what do we need in order to make that happen. Waivers and plans of care, they want to know, why is this important? What's it going to achieve? It's not just because we're going to like it, although we certainly hope that they do. It's more about, or as important, it's about um, how can we connect that to why? Why does this need to happen? And in what way does it need to happen to show that we're making progress or we're achieving a goal or an activity? One of the things that I encourage families to do with their care coordinator is to pull out a 12-month calendar um, and think about uh, different times of the year and different things that need to happen. So, thinking about what needs to happen at home, what needs to happen at school, before school, after school. What about work? Is work something that we're working on? And then recreation. You wouldn't typically think that you had to do a lot of planning around recreation, but if you have a developmental disability, it's not something that you automatically just pick up on. Somebody has to teach you that. And chances are, if you have a developmental disability, you're not going to have a 40-hour-a-week job. So what are you going to be doing when you're not working? What kinds of things in the community are you planning on doing. And a lot of that has to do with recreation, staying healthy, riding your bike, swimming, walking, things that keep your body healthy and also help you create relationships and be part of the community. Remember that we as families have seasons too. So thinking about writing that plan of care and what needs to happen. What happens if your child is still in school and summertime comes? Or what happens over Christmas break? Um, those are times that can be really stressful for individuals with developmental disabilities. So we need to think about how we're making that look. What about fish camp? A lot of families go to fish camp. Is our son or daughter going to go to fish camp with us? They going to fish camp by themselves? But really kind of looking at the year again with that 12 months in the calendar, thinking about uh, the seasons of the world, and also being really specific about holidays. Holidays are going to be at home with your family, or you're going to be out in the community. What is your expectation of 365 days out of the year? Because that's what you're writing for. That's what you're planning for. So, as we're looking at this 12 months of the plan of care, we need to really think about what do we want to happen next and how should it be accomplished. As you're developing your plan of care, one of the most critical pieces in that plan of care is called the personal profile. It's part of the paperwork that you'll be filling out. And it is really, really probably the most critical piece, in my opinion, of what needs to go in the plan of care. It should outline your son or daughter's life. It should tell us lots and lots of things about who they are, their past experience, if they've had significant behaviors or things that really frighten them, or things that they need in order to uh, be successful and not have meltdowns, or just generally, it should be a reflection of who they are. So I would say for Kira gets up about 8 o'clock every morning. We help her with her toileting, give her her bath. We then have breakfast, and she begins to start thinking about what her day is going to be. And people come in and help her then accomplish out in the community what's scheduled for her that day and what's on her plan and what she's opted to do. So it gives you an idea of how much help Kara needs. It um, talks about really who she is. Um, so, for example, Kara has been known to attempt to jump out of moving cars. Kara has bolted in traffic. She's walked in front of uh, swing sets. So, those are things that you really want to know about Kara. Um, and here's why. As you're developing this plan of care and you're writing all those goals and objectives, that profile is going to explain why you could see that you would logically need that particular goal or service or support in order to be safe or to be part of the community or whatever. So, and if it's documented, and it's documented ahead of time, if for some reason SDS finds it necessary to deny a particular activity or service, if you have in your uh, plan of care, personal profile, a description that would explain why something like that would be needed, then that's a good justification, in fact, for why that service or support should be granted. A critical part of that personal profile is really documenting your history and what's happened in the past, because Again, ICAP only looks back 3 months. And you really need to know the reasons why something would be important to include. So if you didn't know that Kara ran out in the street within the last 3 months, you wouldn't know the importance of having a direct service person there that's going to be able to make sure that she's between Kara and the street, that she doesn't dart out in the street and get hit by a car. Again, if you don't have a history, if that's not recorded somewhere and the personal profile is the place to do that, then you really can't justify or explain what that person's life really looks like or could look like. So also included in that personal profile needs to be, health and their health status, things that have happened, but relationships, who's important to that person, what their likes are, dislikes are. So you'll know if, for example, you walk up close to the water and you have a significant behavior, that it's because my daughter was afraid during the swimming class and panicked and won't go in the water. And so if you didn't understand what had happened, you wouldn't know what was causing the behavior, and that really and truly you probably need to avoid being in environments where that's going to trigger behaviors, right? Um, and and then finally, I want to say that I think one of the most important things to include in your plan of care is Kara's strengths or your child's strengths, and not just the deficits. Because we know we're in a deficit world, and in order to have a Medicaid waiver, you've already had to prove all of the things that they can't do and all of the help that they do need. But I like to think of it this way. Um, I'm talented in some ways. Uh, However, I have some significant deficits, one of which would be balancing my checkbook and details. I hate it. I'm terrible at it. If I can avoid it, I will. So that's my deficit. And you could spend a lot of time and money sending me to school. And if I had somebody that really held my hand and I had a lot of tutoring, I might even pass the class. But you would never, ever, ever want me to be your accountant, right? It's not my strength. I'm not going